Yo, 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 what is up, my peeps? It's your main man Cop here. We are back with a brand new series on the channel. With Shadowlands coming up real soon, I figured it was a great time to start looking back at some of the characters and organizations that look to be pretty important in this new expansion. And so, with the help of a certain Tauren Death Knight, known for his love of hamburgers and milkshakes, I thought the perfect place to start was with the Knights of the Ebon Blade. During the events of the first ever expansion of World of Warcraft, Azeroth's heroes were, for the most part, away on the shattered remnants of Draenor, also known as Outland. It was this absence which emboldened the evil Lich King that the time was right to make his move and bring all of the planet under his sway. In order to make this a reality, the Lich King knew that there were a number of key groups and people who needed to be taken care of first in order to ensure success. Outside of the obvious, the Horde and Alliance, there were two major groups he needed to remove from the field and one major individual roadblock. These consisted of the Scarlet Crusade, the Argent Dawn, and the legendary paladin Tyrion Bordring. Coming up with a bold plan to remove these three disparate groups in one stroke, the Lich King created an elite force of Death Knights under his direct command. These would later become the Knights of the Ebon Blade. What made these Death Knights so different from the ones trained in Naxxramas, created by Kel'Thuzad, was that even though they would remain bound to the Lich King's iron will, they would retain their souls, and thus be more effective tactically.
A hero, that's what you once were. You stood boldly against the shadow and purchased another dawn for the world with your life. But the evil you fought is not so easily banished. The victory you claimed, not so easily held. For now, the specter of death looms above the world yet again, and it has found new champions to bring about its final reign. Knights of darkness, wielding runes of death and destruction, bound by the will of the Lich King. This is the hour of their ascension. This is the hour of your dark rebirth.
Forged from the broken bodies and corpses of the many Argent Dawn members and adventurers that had assaulted Naxxramas over the years, this new force of Death Knights had been formed to enact the Lich King's iron will. Initially, the Lich King's plan worked perfectly, with his new force sweeping through the last vestiges of the Scarlet Crusade, destroying Havenshire and New Avalon. However, when this elite force turned its army towards the Argent Dawn's headquarters, Lightshope Chapel, the force of 10,000 Death Knights was routed by a mere 300 defenders when Tyrion Fordring himself joined the battle. And the commander of the Death Knights, one Darian Mulgrave, found that his weapon, the legendary Ashbringer, once a weapon of unsurpassed holy energy and wrath, but corrupted in his undead hands, would no longer obey him. It did not matter, though, for even as the Death Knights surrendered and awaited their fate, the Lich King himself appeared, eager to dispense with the upstart paladin who had hid from him for so long. In his zeal, the Lich King revealed that Darian and his Death Knights were created to fail, to be sacrificed so that Tyrion would be forced to come out of hiding, and Arthas could deal with him personally. Shocked at this betrayal and seeing Tyrion was weaponless, Darian tossed the Ashbringer into his hands. This holy weapon, finally back in the possession of a true disciple of the light, was instantly purified and forced the Lich King to retreat, leaving his Death Knights to their fate. Freed from the Lich King's control, most of the Death Knights formed a new order to hunt down and destroy the one who would curse them to undeath, only to betray them in the end. Thus the Knights of the Ebon Blade were formed. They began to strike at the Lich King in ways only they knew how, taking back the base where they were created, first the Ebon Hold, then returning to their native factions of Order Alliance to plead their case, with a letter of recommendation from Tyrion Mordred. Both Thrall and Rin accepted these Death Knights back into their fold, as their capitals had been on the receiving end of attacks from the Lich King. A campaign in Northrend seemed inevitable, and they could use all the help they could get. Throughout the Northrend campaign, the Knights of the Ebon Blade were valiant. From Borean Tundra, Zaldrak, and eventually Icecrown itself, the Ebon Blade struck at installation after installation of Arthas's, capturing iconic holdings like the Shadow Vault, also known as the only other place on Azeroth to have a rune forge outside of Vakris. Volterras, Naxanar, uncovering the Cult of the Damned in Valiant's Keep, helping the Argent Crusade establishing their own foothold, to the forging of a legendary Shadowlands. Without the heroes of the Ebon Blade, we would all be under the sway of the Lich King now. After the fall of the Lich King, the Knights of the Ebon Blade returned to their respective factions, but found that despite their heroics in Northrend, there was a deep resentment for any former minions of the Lich King. Many of the more prominent Knights of the Ebon Blade found themselves ostracized, and those that weren't were redistributed to battlefields where they were pitted against each other. The most remarkable of these being the reclaimed city of Anderhall. Here, Koltira Deathweaver led the Horde forces against the Sarian's Alliance troops and the vestiges of the Scourge, despite the two Death Knights being close friends. In the end, the Sarian prevailed, and Koltira disappeared. Rumors suggested that he had been taken for some advanced training by the Banshee Queen to ensure no further failures were forthcoming. Due to their overwhelming hatred of anything undead, both Garrosh Hellscream and Varian Rin had no use for the Death Knights of the Ebon Blade, and thus this noble order of knights took almost no part in the Pandaria campaign, and many found themselves drawn back to Aquarius of Northrend, including Darian Mograine, who had never really left. They began to become obsessed with the idea of freeing Bolvar Hordragon from his burden of being the Lich King, and began to research ways in which the Scourge could be controlled or eliminated without there needing to be a jailer of the damned. Darn it, Anjay, we keep it PG here. I know where you were going with that Bender from Futurama reference. Cut it out. Alright, back to the lore. Thus, when the Dark Portal turned red, and Azeroth's heroes found themselves fighting in an alternate Draenor of the past, the Knights of the Ebon Blade went with them. Darian Mograine showed up in both the Horde and Alliance garrisons, attempting to enlist the help of either faction to investigate the original Lich King, Ner'zhul. Figuring that Ner'zhul had not always been the Lich King, and that an examination of his early life might uncover a way to free Bolvar, making an insight into the early days, that idea of the Scourge, and the Frozen Throne itself. Such investigations were for naught, however, when the sorcerer Gul'dan from alternate Draenor found his way to our Azeroth and incited the return of the Burning Legion to our world. Faced with an army too big and too overwhelming for the Horde and Alliance to fight alone, once again, Death Knights, along with other of Azeroth's heroes, stepped to the forefront. The Knights of the Ebon Blade made an alliance with the current Lich King for his aid and aid of the Scourge, thus pledging themselves once again as the right hand of the Lich King. His first command to his new Death Lord, after relocating Aquarius to the Broken Islands. The Lich King commanded the Death Lord to recreate the Four Horsemen to help coordinate and lead the strikes against the Burning Legion. In an effort to accomplish this, the Death Lord, along with High Lord Darian Mograine, set out to raise new champions. The first was Nazgrim, former general of the Horde and right hand of the War Chief. The second, Taurus Trollbane, former King of Stromgarde. The third, Sally Whitemane, High Inquisitor of the Scarlet Crusade. The fourth and final and leader of the Four Horsemen was meant to be the recently deceased wielder of the Ashbringer, High Lord Tyrion Fordring. Unfortunately for the Knights of the Ebon Blade, this necessitated an attack on the site of their one great failure. This time, however, be no different, as the death of Tyrion Fordring had united the disparate factions of Paladins under the leadership of a new High Lord, also wielded the Ashbringer. This new defeat resulted in the Death Knight settling where Darian Mulgrave to occupy the same position once held by his father, leader of the Four Horsemen. Around this time, Thessarion had managed to locate his friend Kultir Deathweed inside the dungeons of Undercity, and enlisted the help of the Death Lord to rescue the captured Death Knight and acquire his aid in the Ebon Knight's fight against the Burning Legion. After a long campaign, many questionable methods being engaged by the Lich King's behest, the Knights of the Ebon Blade and the other heroes of Azeroth were successful in stopping the Legion's invasion, and the Knights, as members of the Scourge, as well as the Horde Alliance, retreated, for the most part, to Northrend, as the bargain with the Death Lord and the Lich King demanded. And although the Death Lord would return to their faction and fight for them, during the Fourth War between the Horde and Alliance, the Knights of the Ebon Blade would be slowly growing and raising new Death Knights from all the varied races of Azeroth, be they allied races or main troops of the Horde and the Alliance. The Knights of the Ebon Blade preparing for war, but a war against who or what would become unclear, until a visit from the former war chief of the Horde to Icecrown Citadel.
Icecrown. A monument to our suffering. The veil between life and death. Where a usurper sits on a frozen throne. But no king rules forever. power.
That power will be your prison.
This world is a prison. Set us all free.
And so it was, with the roof of the world broken and the Shadowlands seeping into our reality, the former Lich King and leader of the Scourge has called upon his Knights of the Ebon Blade. For some of the leaders of the Alliance and Horde have been taken, and must be reclaimed before death claims us all. The heroes of the Alliance and Horde venture, with the Knights of the Ebon Blade at their side, into the Shadowlands, using the broken remnants of the Helm of Damnation. Through the Shadowlands, they will discover how they were made, their ultimate purpose, and the secrets behind the frozen throne. So, what does the future hold for these tortured souls, these heroes who live beyond the Veil of Death? I said it before Shadowlands was announced. This expansion will be to the lore of Death Knights and the Lich King, as Legion was to the Burning Crusade, Demons, and the Burning Legion. Too many things are parallel to the instances, first of all. How Bolvar was beginning to act before Sylvanas tore the Helm of Damnation off his head, to how the campaign of the Death Knights and Legion progressed. I think we'll see the Spirit of Ner'zhul play a beautiful in the final act of this expansion. Because I think he's there in more than one iteration. Put it that way. So with alternate Draenor being attached to our Azeroth, it's entirely possible that some of the spirits from alternate Draenor made their way to the Shadowlands. So we could see people have multiple versions of themselves, which would normally be impossible, right? So we may see the original spirit of Ner'zhul that was perhaps freed when the Helm of Damnation was destroyed, perhaps not. And we'll may see the one that died in the dungeon in Shadowmoon Valley in Warlords of Draenor. I think we're going to see Death Knights and perhaps the other Forsaken rise to prominence in Inlore. Maybe they're the only ones who can fully resist the Jailer. I think Arthas is certainly going to play a huge part in Shadowlands. I see him getting a redemption story. Maybe he'll even get to retake his position as Lich King, but without the influence of Ner'zhul. I mean, I'm convinced that Bolvar is still contaminated by Ner'zhul. We saw, even with Frostmourne Shattered, Arthas' spirit was still tied to it. It was still contained in there, as was a version of Ner'zhul. We saw that in the quest for Frost Death Knights to obtain those shards and forge the Blades of the Fallen Prince in Legion. That was their artifact weapon. So, is it impossible for Bolvar to still have part of Ner'zhul in him, and that part of Ner'zhul be attempting to influence him from the shadows? Certainly not. I think it's entirely possible. I mean, look, Bolvar attacked Light's Hope Chapel. So did Arthas. Bolvar created the Four Horsemen. So did Arthas. It's just a lot of parallels. And the amount of time that Arthas was holding back Ner'zhul's influence, the influence of the Lich King, the Frozen Throne, was about, well, they said between the end of Warcraft 3 and the beginning of Vanilla was 4 years, so that's about another 4 years for Vanilla and Burning Crusade, so that's about 8 years. And between Wrath of the Lich King and Legion, that's Kata, Mob, Wad, and the end of Legion, that's another 8 years, right? So it's entirely possible that Bolvar is beginning to give in to the influence of the Frozen Throne in Arizona. And I really think that's going to be explored hugely, especially with the Knights of the Ebon Blade, who, as we explored in this video, really were the ones to turn the tide against the original Lich King. They knew his methods too well. They knew, they bolstered both the Horde, the Alliance, they bolstered the Argent Crusade, they were part of the Ashen Verdict. They were the downfall of Arthas. They were the thing that tipped the scales. But, you know, I don't know. Arthas, you know, he's been in the Shadowlands for a while, and as we've seen, there's a time dilation difference. So he may have been in the Shadowlands for a long time. And he may be cleansed of the influence of Ner'zhul, and maybe even be humbled now. I mean, I would live for his redemption arc, and maybe seeing him reunite with, and maybe even save Jaina. But at the end of the day, what do you think? Let me know in the comments section. Let me know what you think of all the stuff I've posited, all the stuff I, you know, showed you off here. I know, I can hear you guys typing. I know I left a lot out. This video could have been 2-3 hours long if I'd gone into perfect detail in every single bit of Ebon Knight lore, or Death Knight lore. You know, we could have gone back all the way to the Second War and Terran Gorfine, the first generation of Death Knights. We could have talked about Arthas' journey as a Death Knight. We could have talked about in greater detail about how Thessarian and Koltira Deathweaver became friends. How Thessarian keeps saving him from being captured. How Thessarian and Koltira went on essentially the same mission in Borean Tundra, but just in very different roads. So yeah, let me know. Let me know what you think, what you'd like to hear more about, what difference of opinion you have, you know. If there's any other lore characters you'd like to see. I've got about a dozen planned out, so I might already have some set up, but you never know, I might not too. So, and if there's enough discussion about lore and how we might, something I might have missed or misinterpreted, or maybe I've gotten plain out wrong. I am human after all. I don't claim to be a lore expert. I'm just a lore nut. Let me know in the comments. We might do a follow-up video. Yeah, so let me know, and we can discuss it. We can even discuss it in the stream if you want. Although I'm likely to, if anybody brings it up in the stream who hasn't seen the video, I'm likely just to point you to the videos. So, because this has taken a toll out of me. I had a bunch of different ways I was going to do this originally, and none of them came to fruition. But so anyway, guys, I'm going to put an end slate up here. End slate credits. Yeah, right, cop. Like this is some kind of movie or something. I'm going to put an end slate up with some links to other videos you might enjoy. And yeah, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Anything to say before we go on, Jay? All right, buddy. Like he says, boys and girls, take care of yourselves and each other. Peace. Cop out.